The first sound Clara heard was dripping, not from the rain outside. That soft rhythm had stopped hours ago, but from somewhere closer. She opened her eyes and saw the pale gray ceiling above her, unmoving, too quiet. Her hand brushed the sheets beside her and met cold dampness. Her husband's side of the bed was empty, the covers smooth, except for a dark patch near the pillow. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The faint smell of iron floated in the air. Her hand trembled as she lifted it, realizing the wetness wasn't water. It was something thicker. The bedside clock blinked 3:47 a.m. She whispered his name. Ethan. Nothing. Nothing. Only the drip again, steady and patient, like something waiting to be found. She followed it down the hallway, each step sinking into the carpet. When she reached the kitchen, the lights flickered. There, on the tiles, her reflection shimmered in a pool of red so dark it looked black. Would you still trust your marriage if it started bleeding in the middle of the night? By morning, the house looked normal again. Clara scrubbed the kitchen tiles until her hands were raw. She told herself it had been a dream, a trick of half-sleep and moonlight. But when she opened the refrigerator, she saw his wedding ring lying inside a glass of water. No ice, no explanation. She touched the metal and felt it vibrate slightly, as if humming. Outside, the lake glimmered, pretending nothing had happened. Detective Laura Haynes arrived before breakfast, her shoes leaving wet marks on the porch. She said Ethan's office had called. He never showed up to the meeting he'd been planning all week. Clara stood by the door, hands tucked in her robe pockets, trying to remember if she'd heard his car leave. She lied without meaning to. He's probably gone early, she said, though the driveway was empty and his keys still hung by the door. That afternoon, Clara played the piano for hours, each note trembling out of tune. The melody she chose was one Ethan used to hum while drafting his designs. The sound drifted through the empty rooms, echoing against the silence like an accusation. Every creak of the house made her pause, waiting for his footsteps. But only the lake wind answered. That night, Clara dreamed she was underwater, reaching for Ethan's hand. When she woke, her arm was outstretched, her fingers still moving as if they touched something alive. The sheets smelled faintly of lake water. From downstairs came the low creak of the back door, opening slowly, then closing again. Detective Haynes returned the next morning with questions that sounded like accusations. She asked when Clara had last seen Ethan, when he'd last eaten, when they'd last touched. Clara answered softly, too softly, watching dust drift in the sunlight between them. Then Haynes asked if Ethan ever hurt her. Clara smiled, the kind of smile that belongs to someone hiding a bruise no one can see. She said, "No, he loved me too much to hurt me." But the detective kept her gaze steady and replied, "Sometimes. That's exactly why they do." After the detective left, Clara wandered into Ethan's office. His blueprints were still spread across the desk, symmetrical, flawless, lifeless. She ran her fingers over the ruler lines, following the precision of a man who couldn't stand imperfection. Behind a stack of papers, she found his phone, screen black, battery dead. She plugged it in and waited. She plugged it in and waited. When it powered up, a single message flashed across the screen. "I told you not to look." That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house seemed amplified. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, the faint whisper of wind against the window. She walked through the rooms barefoot, listening. When she passed the mirror in the hallway, she thought she saw movement behind her. Just a flicker. A figure. Tall and still, standing in the dark. When she turned, there was nothing. Only the faint smell of wet earth drifting from the open window. In the morning, Michael Ward came to the house. He said he wanted to help, but his eyes darted around the rooms too quickly, as if checking what she knew. When she offered him coffee, he declined. When she asked about the last night he saw Ethan, he hesitated. He was worried, Michael said quietly. He thought you were hiding something from him. Clara smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. Funny, she whispered. I thought the same about him. That evening, the house grew restless again. The lights flickered, then steadied. The piano in the living room played 3 single notes. Slow, deliberate, wrong. Clara froze in the doorway, watching the keys move by themselves. The sound echoed through the house like a heartbeat. Then came a whisper, barely audible, from the empty air. You shouldn't have buried me there. Her knees buckled, and for the first time since Ethan disappeared, she screamed. The next morning, police tape fluttered in the wind by the lake. Clara stood behind it, her coat buttoned up tight, her eyes following the ripples. Divers moved in slow circles. She could see Detective Haynes talking to one of them, gesturing toward a spot just beyond the reeds. Then the diver disappeared underwater. A minute passed. 2. Then the radio crackled, and Haynes' face changed. Clara felt it before she saw it. That subtle shift in the air, the heaviness of truth rising. They'd found something. When they pulled the object out, the crowd fell silent. It wasn't a body, not yet, but the rusted frame of an old piano. Water dripped from its broken keys, making a slow metallic sound. Haynes crouched beside it, frowning. This was in your basement once, wasn't it? She asked. Clara nodded faintly. Ethan moved it last month. The detective's gaze lingered too long before she said, Why would anyone dump a piano in the lake? Clara had no answer. She just stared at the black water, as if it could still play. That night, Clara couldn't stop hearing it. The clinking sound of water striking piano keys. She sat in the living room, lights off, waiting for the noise to fade. But instead she heard something else, Ethan's voice on the voicemail. Clara, it whispered, the recording crackling. If you're hearing this, don't go near the basement. The line went dead, leaving the soft hum of static, like breathing too close to her ear. Unable to resist, she descended the basement stairs. The smell hit her first. Damp wood and something sweet, rotten. The bulb flickered as she pulled the chain. The room was nearly empty now, except for a shallow dent in the concrete floor where the piano once stood. In the corner, something glimmered under a tarp. She lifted it with shaking hands and found a cracked mirror. The surface warped and cloudy. Her reflection smiled back before she did. At dawn, Detective Haynes knocked again, harder this time. Her expression said she'd seen enough. We found human remains inside the piano frame, she told Clara quietly. They were wrapped in a blanket. Clara stood motionless, one hand on the doorframe. For a moment, her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. Then she whispered, almost tenderly, he always wanted to be part of the music. Clara sat in the interrogation room, staring at the metal table as Detective Haynes slid a folder toward her. Inside were photographs, fragments of a man's body, torn fabric, the faint outline of piano strings pressed into pale skin. We matched the blanket, Haynes said. It's from your guest room. Clara didn't flinch. Her voice, calm and distant, broke the silence. Then you already know, she said. Haynes leaned closer. I want to hear it from you. Clara smiled faintly, but her eyes looked past the detective, as if watching someone else in the corner of the room. When they released her that evening, she drove straight home without remembering how. The sky was the color of bruised steel, and the lake shimmered like glass. Inside the house, everything felt smaller, the walls closer, the air heavier. She poured herself a drink and stared at her reflection in the kitchen window. For a moment, it wasn't her own face she saw staring back, but Ethan's, eyes open and unblinking. Then the glass in her hand cracked, and the reflection was gone. That night, Clara dreamt of the lake again. She was sitting at the piano underwater, her dress floating around her like pale smoke. Ethan stood behind her, whispering something she couldn't hear. When she turned, he wasn't there. Only his hands resting on her shoulders. The music started on its own, muffled and wrong, echoing through the dark water. When she woke, her pillow was soaked with tears and lake water. In the following days, Clara's home became a shrine of sound. Doors creaked even when closed, footsteps echoed from empty rooms, and the piano played short, familiar fragments of a melody Ethan had written for her years ago. "Our song," he'd called it. She couldn't remember the last time she heard it without crying. One afternoon, she tore the piano apart with a hammer, smashing the keys, breaking the strings. But even after the silence settled, she could still hear it, faint, beneath the floorboards. Later that night, Clara sat in the ruins of the piano, surrounded by fragments of wood and silence so heavy it felt alive. She looked toward the basement door. It was slightly open, though she remembered locking it. A cold draft rolled out. She stood, trembling, and whispered, "What do you want from me?" A faint creak answered from below, followed by a slow, dragging sound, like something climbing the stairs. The power went out just after midnight. The house sank into darkness so complete that Clara could hear her heartbeat echoing in it. She lit a candle and called out for Ethan, even though she knew how foolish it sounded. The floorboards creaked in reply. As she moved through the living room, the candle flickered, throwing warped shapes against the wall. One of them looked exactly like him, tall, still, watching. Then it tilted its head the way he used to when she played the piano. She followed the shadow down the hallway until she reached the basement door. It was open wider now, the smell of wet earth curling through the air. She stood at the top of the stairs, candle trembling in her hand, and whispered, "Ethan." The sound that came back was a low, bubbling breath, too close, too real. Her candle guttered out, plunging everything into darkness. Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps climbing upward, slow, dragging, one after another. When the light returned, she wasn't sure how long she'd been standing there. The door to the basement was shut now. Her hands were shaking, her breath coming in short bursts. She reached for the doorknob and felt it. Damp, cold, sticky. Pulling her hand back, she saw dark residue smeared across her skin. The smell hit her next. Metallic. Sweet. The kind of scent that never truly leaves the house, no matter how much you scrub. Later, she found herself in the bedroom, staring at Ethan's side of the bed again. The dent in the pillow was back, fresh. A small puddle of water glistened where his head should have been. Her reflection in the mirror above the dresser began to shift, rippling like the lake's surface. Then Ethan's voice came, clear as glass. "You promised forever," she whispered. "I kept my promise." The mirror cracked, slicing the reflection in two. At 3:47 a.m., the piano started playing again, though she destroyed it days ago. The melody was wrong, off-key, yet heartbreakingly familiar. Clara walked toward the sound, her face pale, her eyes hollow. The music grew louder, echoing from beneath the floor. She knelt, pressing her ear to the ground. A voice whispered through the wood, "You can't drown love." Her lips trembled, and then she whispered back, "But I did." Detective Haynes returned unannounced, her face gray from lack of sleep. She said the divers had found more, Ethan's wedding band, lodged between the piano strings. "It was wedged deep," she said quietly, "like someone forced it there." Clara didn't answer. Her eyes were on the lake through the window where a single ripple spread across the surface, though the wind was still. "You should leave," she murmured. Haynes frowned. "Why?" Clara turned to her slowly, voice trembling but certain. "Because he's coming back tonight." That night, rain returned, violent and endless. Water streamed down the windows, and the house shuddered under the storm. Clara sat in the dark, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. Every flash painted the room in blue-white light. On the fourth strike, she saw him, standing in the doorway, dripping, expressionless. His eyes were black with water. His lips barely moved as he said her name. voice bubbling with air. "Clara." Then he was gone, leaving puddles that led toward the basement door. Clara followed the trail, her breath sharp and shallow. The puddles grew darker the closer she came to the basement. Her reflection shimmered in them, but there was another reflection beside her, walking in sync. She whispered, "Ethan, please stop." The answer came in a voice not from her ears, but from the water itself. "You didn't stop either." Then a cold hand grabbed her ankle and pulled. She screamed and fell hard, the world spinning. When she looked up, she was in the basement again, though she hadn't taken a single step down. The walls were slick with moisture, water dripping steadily from above. In the corner, the cracked mirror stood upright, perfectly clean now. Ethan's reflection stared back from it. He raised his hand, and so did she, perfectly in sync. Then his reflection smiled, and she didn't. The mirror began to ripple, glass bending like water. Ethan stepped through it, silent, dripping. Clara crawled backward, whispering apologies that dissolved into sobs. "You said you loved me," he murmured. "I did," she cried. "I still do." He leaned closer, water running from his hair to her hands. "Then come with me." She shook her head, trembling. "I can't." His smile widened. "You already did." The light bulb above exploded, plunging the basement into black. When Clara woke, the basement was dry. No water, no mirror, no Ethan. Just silence. The morning sun bled through the cracks of the small window, revealing muddy footprints leading up the stairs, both sets of them. Her own, and another pair, larger, stopping at the kitchen door. On the table sat 2 glasses of water, one half empty, the other untouched. For the first time, Clara didn't know which was hers. Detective Haynes returned at noon. She looked older now, as though the house itself had aged her overnight. "We found Ethan's car," she said quietly. "It was in your garage." Clara just nodded. "He never left, Detective." Haynes blinked, confused. Clara smiled faintly. "He's been home the whole time." The air turned colder between them. Somewhere upstairs, the piano played a single broken note. Clara led her to the basement without a word. Each step creaked under their weight. When they reached the bottom, the air grew heavy, damp again. The mirror was back, glistening like ice. "He's waiting," Clara whispered. Haynes raised her flashlight. The beam caught something beneath the surface. The outline of a man's face, eyes open, mouth moving soundlessly. The detective stumbled backward, but Clara didn't flinch. "He said he forgave me," she murmured, "if I play one last song." Clara sat at the shattered piano, her fingers tracing the broken keys as though remembering something sacred. The melody returned on its own, uneven, off-tempo, but tender. Haynes shouted her name, but Clara didn't hear. She played harder, faster, the sound echoing against the walls until water began to seep through the cracks in the floor. The basement flooded in minutes. As the water rose to her waist, Clara whispered, "I told you I'd never leave." By dawn, the house was quiet again. Rescue crews found no sign of Clara. Only the piano submerged in dark water, its strings humming faintly when touched. Detective Haynes stood at the shoreline, staring at the lake that mirrored the house perfectly, upside down. For a moment, she thought she saw Clara and Ethan standing in the reflection, side by side, smiling. Then a ripple erased them both. The detective whispered to herself, "Some promises drown deeper than bodies."